Good evening. Welcome to the Iowa City Community School District Board meeting on June 28, 2016. I call this meeting to order. I'm Brian Kirschling, Board Vice President, standing in for Chris Lynch, who could not be present this evening. Thank you to all present in the audience and for taking interest in our district business, as well as those watching at home on television. Before we get started, I'd like to do introductions for those seated at the table. From my right, Superintendent Steve Murley, Director Lori Rotland, Director Phil Hemingway, Director Latasha Deloach, Director Chris Liebig, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. First item on our agenda this evening is, in fact, community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you would like to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. The initial community comment period shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. To the extent you are commenting on items not on our posted agenda, the board may ask follow-up questions of speakers, but is prohibited by the Iowa Open Meetings Law from responding to questions from speakers or from engaging in substantive discussions regarding non-agenda items. We have a couple comments this evening. Usually we take students first. There are no students in the batting order. So first up is Peter Byler, and on deck is Ellen Sweet.
Hi, my name's Peter Byler. I live at 30 Ashwood Drive in Iowa City. I apologize, it's my first time at a school board meeting, so I had a couple things on the agenda that I wanted to speak to briefly. The first one is B14, which is a consent agenda item for spending $50,000-ish or $40,000 to move 2 classrooms to Alexander Elementary. And I would hope that someone during the meeting might call that out. I don't know if you guys talk about the consent agenda during the meeting or if you just vote on it without talking about it, but that seems very strange to me that we just paid how many millions of dollars for a new school and it already needs 2 classrooms. It might just be speaking to our incredible growth, but I have a feeling something else might be going on and I don't know what it is, so I would love to know more about that. Second issue is B17. The HVAC commissioning contract at Weber and Lucas Elementary. We're approaching several. I tried to do a count. It's $300,000 or $400,000 we're approaching to spend with this company on a no-bid contract, which I know is required by law. And I can only speak from personal experience. But at the elementary school my children attend, when you're outside the building and it's 10 degrees and there are open windows, or when your children at the end of the day are sweating, when we just spent $1 million or something on air conditioning, makes me think that the commissioning company, if that's what they're supposed to be doing, isn't doing a good job. So I would hope we maybe would reconsider going out for bids on that on a competitive basis. The last thing I wanted to comment on, I love the timer, that's very good. The last thing I wanted to comment on was C2, the negotiated agreement with the Education Association and the teachers. I wanted to say that 3.71% raise I'm hugely in favor of, and I'm very glad that our teachers in the school district are well paid, I think, compared to surrounding school districts, and I hope we strongly support that going forward. My only comment is, as a parent of a third grader and a kindergartner who have a lot of energy and don't like to sit for hours and hours and hours at a time, I don't know if it was last year or the year before when I was new to the district, I think, and I'm assuming it was part of the teachers' negotiated agreement that we went from a certain number of days at a certain number of hours to fewer days with more hours. And the things that I read about length of school day versus length of school year seem to indicate that that is the opposite of the way that most people think is better for student achievement and learning. It's actually better to have a longer school year with shorter days. I'm thinking that in one of the years where we didn't have much money and we couldn't give the teachers as big a raise as we may have wanted, maybe that was a concession to the teachers to actually shorten their year. I don't know if that's true or not, but if that's true, I would hope that in these years where we're able to find almost a 4% raise, which is great, I would hope we would put that back on the board to go the other way, to shorten the school days and lengthen the school year. You know, now, especially as going forward, we're going to have a lot more air-conditioned schools. Hopefully, maybe all the schools will be air-conditioned. It won't matter if it's June and we're in school or whatever. I just know for my sons, especially my third grader, what he learns between, you know, probably after 1 o'clock in the afternoon is in one ear and out the other compared to what he's learning, you know, during the earlier hours of the day. So I hope that's a consideration that'll be kind of put on the table going forward. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Peter. Ellen?
My name is Ellen Sweet. I live at 1219 Oakcrest Street. And what else did I have to say? That's it. Okay, I wanted to talk about equity and balance. It would be hard to deny that those aren't very important attributes for a school district, and that we should do everything we can to have every student's experience be as equal or equitable as possible. Diversity is important in all of our schools, and I have no problem with that. I do think, though, when the district approves of that policy, when they implement that policy, that they not only need to go district-wide, they must go district deep. And by deep, I mean kids start learning in kindergarten and in elementary school. So you must apply that also to the grade schools. The other part is that in achieving this diversity, balance, equity, it is important that there is no disproportionate or disparate impact on any subgroup in the student population. So you need to keep that in mind, that the students learn that everybody is treated equally and with respect. So you can't just change lives for FRL students in the sense of busing them. It must be equal throughout the district, and it must be deep. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Next item on the agenda is district business, the consent agenda.
Yeah, I'd like to pull B4, B14, and B17.
I'd like to pull number 2 in addition.
What was that, Chris? I didn't hear you.
It's number 2, B2.
B2.
And out of respect for our community commenter, I'd like to pull 14 so we could just discuss that a bit.
Yeah, I thought I said
Oh, I thought you said 4. I'm sorry.
4, 14, and 17. No problem.
Sorry.
So I hear 2 votes to pull B14. Entertain a motion?
I make a motion to pull items. You want 2, Chris?
2.
2, 4, 14, and 17.
I'm sorry, I meant motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Excuse me.
Absent.
Less those.
Except for those.
Excuse me. It's been a while.
We'll take a motion.
Second? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I made
Clear
a
enough
motion
motion.
to approve the consent agenda minus 2, 4, 14, and 17.
Second.
Oh, yes, we're ready for a vote, Kim, sorry. I don't often get to say that.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Okay, next item on the agenda is board work, C1, negotiated agreements. I guess I've taken these in en masse, C1, 2, and 3, or just, we have to take one at a time, don't we, Steve? Yeah,
Yes, you'll need separate motions for
thank you.
each.
Okay.
Thank you, Board. President Lynch asked me to prepare just a little 4-slide thing about negotiations, so I did that for him, and then you have all the other request for approval. So he wanted me to speak a little bit about just the parameters affecting settlements. Excuse me. We finally got numbers from the state. As you know, they were late again this year, of 2.25 supplemental state aid. And then because of our growth, we actually had a 4.88 district new money due to enrollment and growth. And that's, it's good news in the fact that we get that additional money, but we need to have more staff to serve those students. So we had 343.17 increase in certified enrollment. And our regular programming cost for the previous year was $86 million. And with the program growth, we had $90 million, which gave us new money of $4.2 million. And that's kind of what we had to base our settlements on. And we, as you know, we work with the board to set parameters for settlements, and we stayed within those parameters. We always receive direction from the board as far as what they choose to do with I obviously input from administration. There's always this kind of question about why the teachers' salaries are a little bit higher, so President Lynch wanted me to explain that. The state has teacher salary supplement money that comes directly from the state that goes directly to teachers, and that's pass-through money for us. It's not coming out of our general budget. That's going directly to the teacher settlement. And so if our settlement dollars for the teachers were $88 million, the part that we got from the state was the $7 million of that, which is about 8% of that settlement. So remember that 8% when we go to that next slide. And so there's lots of things. When we're in private sector, when you see settlements in the paper, it's usually just basically salary. It doesn't include benefits. We have benefit costs that go up that we include in our settlement package. So we do what we call a total package settlement. And that's insurance increases, and this is the first year that insurance went significantly up from what it has in the previous years. We had about a string of 6 years in a row where our insurance costs did not go up. This year it did. And then we look at bargaining issues. We look at the settlement trends. Right now, actually those settlement trends that I have on this slide are incorrect. The state average right now is 3.42. And that's with 180 districts reporting. And it's always better to be part of a growing district than one that's declining. And their average new money for all those 180 school districts is about 1.72% new money. So in other words, the state gives them 2.25, but because of declining enrollment, they're not even receiving the 2.25. So we are in a much better position than those schools. If you look at the difference between a 3.42 settlement and a 1.7 new money, that's a significant difference. And if you look at our settlements, ours is in much better situation than those. And then you look at contract language. Sometimes either the district side or the teacher side, they choose to give up a little money to get strengthening the contract or vice versa. We were very neutral on language this year. We have 2-year settlements for all of our formal negotiations, which is good because the language takes the longest time, and for somebody stepping into my role next year, they're going to be dealing only with the money, and that's good news for the district. And then the length of the settlement agreement. Sometimes the district or sometimes the union or the association would like longer, which is always a risk, especially when we don't know what we're receiving from the state for more than a year. It used to be, according to state statute, that we would get 2 years. We would know 2 years in advance our new money, but that hasn't been the case. So it's a little more risky to. When I was here before, we had a settlement that at one time were 3 years, and that was beneficial to the district at that time. And then it really always comes down to the relationships we build. We have wonderful relationships with our Teachers Association and our SEIU groups. And there's got to be that certain element of trust in order for negotiations to go well. So all of those things factor in. So in closing, the summary of all of our groups, teachers look higher, that's why there's an asterisk, but you remember we have to subtract off about if you take 8% of the 3.71, that's about 3.14% of that settlement, so it's really under 3.4, which was within the parameters that the board gave me to do. Physical plant was right in where we wanted. Paraeducators is higher because that's the second of a two-year agreement. And so we didn't negotiate with the paraeducators this year at all because it was already determined last year. Building secretaries, nutritional services, meet and confer. The administrators were a little bit lower, and then the grant, the off-schedule tech supervisor and food service all came in under the parameters that the board directed the administration to come into. And then at your place, there's any questions on any of those? This is more for the public, as you know,
I'm just going to ask you a question that I asked
Sure.
before, so this is more for them. So we've used all of our new money with our raises. So can you talk about how that impacts class allocation and class sizes?
Well, I don't think we've quite used all of our new money. I think we do have the settlement there. The new money was here, and the settlement, if you look at the difference between the 86 million and the 88 million for the teacher settlement, these settlements were within the guidelines of those 4.2 million. Our class sizes will not increase because of the settlement.
And maybe I wrote it down wrong, that we had 42 million new money, and this was going to cost us 42 million, I'm sorry, not 42 million. That would be great. 4.2.
Problem solved.
Bingo, sorry. Big error. 4.2 million. So, but we did not use all of that up with our increases?
I don't think so. I'll defer to Greg on that. Yeah, no.
That's what I wrote down. But
Okay.
anyway, I'll say the answer that you told me in this session was that because of some early retirement offers that you made, that you were expecting to be able to hire back additional teachers, even though we were going to be coming out.
And we've
basically
actually
flat.
increased. Say it again.
If you scroll up a little bit, I think what he was trying to draw, no, the other way. I think what he was trying to draw attention to was the regular program district cost at 86 million, and then with the settlement, regular program district cost is 88 million. So the settlement spends those dollars, but through that process, we actually wind up recouping some money through the turnover of employees.
Right, with some of the early retirement. Yeah. Thank you.
You don't want me to click this one? I want to go back to each one of those. Thank you. Let's go back to this one.
I'm at CIU.
Yeah. Well, no. Is that the first one? Okay. So what I need approval on is the formal negotiations with the SEIU groups and the formal negotiations with the teachers and paraeducators. And then the administrators, since they're certificated staff, I need approval on those. The meet and confer, I don't necessarily need approval. It's kind of like entering into a marriage. It's kind of nice to have your blessing on those. So I don't know if we need a motion for each one.
You could take the motion in mass, or you could do them individually as they're listed on the agenda.
Well, first off, thank you, Jim, for the presentation and for keeping us informed throughout the previous 4 or 5 months. It's helpful for us to be part of the process every step of the way. I would recommend that we take these separately. To add.
Which do you want up?
Starting with CIU.
Can I move to approve the SEIU agreement?
Second.
Kim, I guess we're ready for a vote. I'm going to get used to that.
Well, do we have discussion?
I guess, do we just, let's have discussion on it.
Well, the only thing I would like to say is that I would hope at some point in time we can find a way to bring back our home building program. And it's not a huge amount of money to get in when you look at all of the numbers and everything in here that I would urge administration to take every effort to find a way to make that happen.
Okay. All right. Now, Kim, we're ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Moving on to item C2.
Do we need a motion on that?
We do.
I move to approve the negotiated ICEA agreement.
Discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And moving on to item C3. Which, despite you, Jim, asking for just our blessing, I think that we should probably have a motion. All right, I move that we approve item C3, the meet and confer agreements.
Second.
Discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you again, Jim, for all of your work on this.
Thank you very much, and I just want to thank the board for their support, and it's been an honor to serve the district again. So my last day is Thursday, so I appreciate everything you've done.
So this is your final retirement, Jim, or?
Moving on to the Appendix 9 items under operational work. Dwayne, I believe, or did I go to Dwayne for that? Steve for that? What do I?
Yes, move to Dwayne for that.
Move to Dwayne for that.
We're ready for appendix 9. Well, we're sitting around, excuse me. We have three projects and 3 requests. The first one is a change order for $110,000 at Liberty High School. A lot of that is for some structural work and some steel that need to be revamped. I think we're near the end of some of these big change orders out there. They've gotten through the mechanical work and the steel, but these have all been justified. Step 4 for safety and security. Step 6 is for Phase 6B, which is City High School. We're currently designing the last two projects, City and West High, for the safety and security. As you know, we've been through every building in the district now. So we're asking that the design development be approved. If you're interested, those drawings are at the physical plant. And maybe I should just stop there and say why we don't present those in public. We typically don't put the floor plans out on the website for security reasons. So that's why we ask if you want to see it. You're always welcome to come down. That's good. That's just a good reminder because we're trying to protect the integrity and the safety of our students and staff. The last one is step 8. It's a change request for $22,700. And we've run into some poor soil conditions for the West High tennis courts. No surprise. I don't think we've had a job yet where we haven't found something. We've got into some native soils that are soft. The process out there, if you're interested, is that basically it's a big rotor tiller, and we go through the soil and we mix Portland cement with it. And that Portland cement helps harden the soil and makes it more dense and more compact so you can build on top of it. So we're actually going to over-dig part of it, and I did provide you a diagram of where that area is on the West High tennis courts as part of this Appendix 9. So we're going to over-dig. We're going to stabilize what we over-dig and then recompact it and build on top of it. And I'm just going to tell you up front, that 22.7 may not be the final number. It may be less, it may be more, but we need to keep the project moving. So that's a not to exceed number. If they need to go over that, they need to demonstrate how many cubic yards they've actually treated. So with that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Now, didn't we hire Terracom or somebody to do soil analysis and everything out there prior to the construction?
Yeah, we actually, in most of our projects, we do at geotech when we're going to build heavy structures on them. This was not a heavy structure, so we didn't do the actual testing until we got into the project. So there was no testing done prior to construction, to my knowledge. It's all been since construction started. There's no real structure going on top of this. It's just the slab itself. And I would say to you, we've done soil testings at all our projects prior to, and it's impossible to pinpoint every location that you may find poor soils. For example, at Hoover, the new Hoover Elementary, we did some soil testing. Some of the soils were fine, some were not. And you just can't do enough testing on the front end to determine where you might find bad soils. Because it varies. It isn't the entire site, it's just part of the site.
I have to say, this is about the shortest Appendix 9 that I've seen in 3 years of being up here. Entertain a motion to approve the Appendix 9 items.
I move to approve the Appendix 9 items.
Second.
Jinx. Discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Now we're on to items withdrawn from the consent agenda. It was B2, B4, B14, and B17.
B2 was Chris's.
Now, that was me. I just wanted to look at one item in the minutes because we talked about it at the work session, but it seemed like there was some confusion afterwards about what we had decided. So we were talking for a while about getting the age progression charts of the type that we got for the high schools, but also for the junior high schools. And the way it's reflected in the minutes is the way that I do remember it, which is the superintendent will compile similar charts for junior high schools. My thinking at that time was that it would not require putting it on another work session agenda, but that we would just get the numbers. And I just wanted to make sure that was what everybody else was also thinking about what we sort of said at that meeting.
I'm not quite sure I understand.
Remember the age progressions for the
Yeah,
high
yeah.
schools? Well, we were going to get similar ones for the junior highs under these different scenarios that we got them for the high schools.
But not on a work session agenda?
No, we were just going to get, because we
Right.
sort
Oh, I
of discussed
see.
how we weren't going to have any more work sessions till after
Right.
we have a seventh member.
Right.
But it was my understanding we'd get those numbers in the meantime.
We can get those.
Yes.
Oh,
Well, there we have it. Okay.
All right.
You just don't have them yet.
You know, what I'll do is just suggest we put an item on the agenda for the next meeting, just if there's follow-up questions about them.
That way they can be posted on board
We can get to
docs
that
as
when we
well.
get to agenda setting, yeah.
Put it on as an amendment, or an attachment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the public can see them.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think we also discussed the one additional high school scenario, which was the one where the western portion of Alexander would remain at west, but Kirkwood would not be at west. No, Kirkwood would be at west. The western portion of Alexander would be at west, but the eastern portion would be at city. And it seemed like the only one we got was not quite that one. So I think that's also reflected in the
Yes.
recording. So
So what I have for that one is West High with Kirkwood, and with only the western
Yeah.
portion of Alexander west of the river, correct?
right, and then the equivalent version of city, which maybe you already gave us. So city with only the eastern portion of Alexander. I think you may have already given us that one.
I think I did, but I'll make sure.
Okay. So what do I do now? I move for approval of the minutes?
Yep.
Yes, I'd like to approve item number 2.
second.
All right, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
Get that sooner or later.
All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Item B4, I think, Phil, that was you.
Yes, accounts payable. And Chris and I did the record.
Able to do part of it
Right,
before I got
we
called away.
looked at the bills, and Craig and Les were very helpful in answering questions. If anyone goes through it, there's this, $5,000 worth of cookie dough does, draw your eye to it. And that was a fundraiser type of a thing, and there was a discussion about fundraisers trying to get away from being food type events. And although cookie dough perks my interest, it may not be the most healthy thing for us to be promoting. The other thing, as far as that with the bills, everything looked fine, and that. I did have some concerns, and I wanted to talk to Dwayne about Pace Supply Company. There was a check, 340,3793, and in the description it has erosion matting control and plant health, which, plant health, I was thinking, well, why the heck wouldn't you put fertilizer if it's fertilizer? And I looked up the bill, and it was actually Q4 plus 2,4-D and dicamba herbicide. And I, especially, in IPM, we had a big discussion about trust at the last meeting, and, I look at that and I think it's profoundly deceitful and factually challenged to have it described as that. And I guess I did ask the financial office to try and see if it was just like a one-time thing or if it's an ongoing thing, but I think if we're buying herbicide, we better tell the public we're buying herbicide.
And, you want to go ahead, Craig?
Yeah, I did follow up on that, and I do have a little bit more information.
Oh, please.
From what we could determine, this was a one-time description error on our part, and I readily agree with you that when you're buying herbicide, you probably shouldn't call it plant health. But what happens is that our guys that are tasked with this responsibility of purchasing this, they basically tell the accounts payable people and the clerical people, they say what they did and what should go into the system, I think that's just an educational process on our part. There was, I can assure you there's no intent or deceit behind that. It's simply a clerical error. What we used the product for was the new football field at West. And as you know, we just seeded that here not so long ago, and the weeds were outperforming the grass. And in order for that to be a safe place for our athletes this fall, our IPM coordinator took a look at that. The threshold of weeds versus grass was extremely high. He felt that treatment was necessary, and so he authorized that treatment to take place, and that authorization took place on 6/8 of 16. They went out and treated it, and I believe there's going to be one more treatment of the product that was purchased in order for us to put that field in the condition that's required for our athletes. So
Okay.
that's kind of what we'll strive to do
Sure.
better next time, is to provide better explanations.
So our staff then tells the secretaries what the invoice is for instead of looking at the invoice that says herbicide?
Actually, what they do is they call in and request a purchase order number, and when they do that, then they tell whoever answers the phone what types of items they're purchasing.
What they're going to buy.
Okay. Because I guess looking at the invoice, there's no way you would say plant food by
Right.
looking at the invoice.
The person that entered that took the information over the phone, didn't look at the invoice.
And as I've explained to you before, we have a limited amount of space in the system, and a lot of times what happens is they'll grab the first thing off of the invoice, or they'll grab one of the initial explanations, and it's not reflective of the entire invoice, because many times we buy multiple things on the same trip, and so we really struggle, honestly, with providing full disclosure on that short definition.
No, I understand, and, up above, erosion control matting, that's fairly long area, and
Right.
that invoice was only 10 gallons of probably the most expensive herbicide we could buy. That, like I say, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I think when we buy herbicide, we just say it's herbicide. I urge pass of item 4 on the consent agenda.
Second?
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next item is B14.
Yes, and I think I found a kindred spirit in Peter. I think further discussion on why a modular is going to Alexander when it's supposedly under capacity, and everything along those lines. If we could just have a little further explanation.
I'm going to defer to the superintendent.
I had a similar question, just because, as I understand, there's 25 classrooms there. This past year, there were 16 gen ed classrooms, but I know that there's a need for classrooms beyond what you just use for gen ed, and certainly music and art. And I just think it would be helpful, because I think people would appreciate hearing sort of how the needs hash out. And maybe we'll have more FTEs down there this year because of the paid resource allocation. But
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes, and so from that standpoint, one of the things that we talked about earlier was amending 3J6, which we're going to talk about in our work session. And as we look at providing greater levels of staffing resources at the schools with our greatest barriers to achievement, one of the things that we're looking at doing is reducing class sizes under those new aspirational class size goals. Alexander was full at the old class size goals. With the new class size goals, we need some additional instructional spaces down there. We also have some specialized programs in there. We've got a pre-K program which serves the neighborhood, and also 3 special education classrooms that occupy individual classroom spaces there. And so we had a really tough decision as we looked at what to do for next fall. The one model, we could have provided the additional teachers there to provide for the smaller class sizes and do so in the current existing building, but that would have meant displacing the special education programs which serve neighborhood kids, or displacing the pre-kindergarten program, which serves neighborhood kids. And after a lot of conversation with the principal and staff there about that, their preference was to keep those programs at the school. Again, those special education students are neighborhood kids. Those pre-K kids are neighborhood kids, and that gives them an extra year in the school. And so their preference was to retain those programs. If we retained those programs, then we needed additional classroom space in order to provide for additional teachers down there. So the only way to achieve that at this point in time was to add some modular classrooms. Moving forward, one of the things that we'll be able to do is look at the definition of neighborhood, if you will, and consider whether there might be opportunities to relocate the pre-K program and or special education programs that are currently at Alexander within either perhaps the Wood or the Twain schools, given capacity there. But at this late date, what we didn't want to do, and the feedback that we got from the building was we didn't want to displace either special education or pre-kindergarten, but we also wanted to be able to provide the additional teachers down there to reduce the class sizes, and this was the best way to do that.
Do you know already how many additional teachers will be going down there? How many additional gen ed classrooms you'd have?
I was going to say, I think it's 3. We've ideally, under the 3J6, which we'll talk about later this evening here, we would actually provide more teachers down there, but given the constraints that we have with budget and with space, 3 was what we determined we would be able to place there next fall, because we're looking at dealing with all 6 of our higher need schools and then working at our mid-need schools too.
Well, so again, just going sort of working through the numbers, so that would be about 19 gen ed classrooms, 3 special ed classrooms brings you up to 22. Then you've got a pre-K is 23. Music and art brings you up to 25, which is all the classrooms in the building. And then you just need some extra space. I mean, to have meetings or.
Well, I think we've got ELL and some other programs there, but I'll defer to
ELL
Amy
and
for
Title I,
comment.
we've got needs for teachers. We were using the end of the hallways already this year to accommodate for that.
All right. Well, thanks. Yeah.
Just for the sake of the community, do you know what classes will be held in the modulars?
Not yet.
Specials or?
Just for information perspective, usually the goal of the principals is to try to put older children out there, simply because going in and out of the building is more easily facilitated with 5th and 6th graders than it is, for instance, with K1. So if there are regular classrooms out there, we usually work on the upper grade levels.
And if I just, Dwayne could comment on the vendor, the winning vendor on this one. We're half the price of the next bid. It's great, but as far as the scope, is that moving footings ready to occupy the building?
That does, and we questioned the vendor to make sure that he had the capacity to do it and that he was happy with his price, and they indicated they were. I think it's probably more a reflection of the other vendor having more work than they need.
Okay, excellent. Thank
Now,
you.
we're still on 14, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Now, the only thing that I did wonder about, I figured it was 14 or 15, but those are being moved from Lucas?
Actually, the one at Alexander is being moved from Wood. The 2 that are going to Hills, one's coming from Lucas and one is coming from Hoover.
I remember Lucas being pretty overstuffed, so how's the situation there going to look?
Say that again.
Maybe I can jump in on that.
Yeah,
So he was
sure.
asking about Lucas being full. It is. So one of the things that we're doing at Lucas, again, that's one of our high need schools. So we're also looking at reduction in class sizes there. So we'll actually have 2 of the multiplex modulars there. And so that offsets the one that's lost and shipped out.
The 6-plex that we approved at the last board meeting is going to Lucas.
Right. So we'll have the smaller class. Right.
They just won't be on the same street at the same time. I approve item B14.
I second that motion.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, just to summarize the fact that this is our first go-around with weighted resource allocation, and that getting the supports in place for the schools that need those supports, need smaller class sizes. I think this is this is a good move. So, any other discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And item B17.
Yes, and like the commenter said, I've commented on this many times myself, and Dwayne and I have gone kind of round and round on it. I share the community members' concern when we have one bidder. I think the previous one shows, yeah, you have two. Competition is good. Competition is welcome. Are we still pursuing, and myself on a very fundamental level, I just have a real problem with paying the extra cost when we should be hiring someone competent in the first place, and it seems like it's money we're spending that we shouldn't have to. But if you could comment on your attempts or lack of attempts to try and find secondary services and why you feel this vendor is our preferred.
Well, the first thing I would say is that I agree with you. We need to hire competent engineers. I think we've been doing a pretty good job of that. We have a qualified pool of architects and engineers. Both of these projects were competitively proposed by those architectural firms a year ago, if you recall. And matter of fact, they have different engineers on both of them that are doing the mechanical design work. So there are different firms working on these projects just to set the stage. But in terms of System Works, we have at least 3 times in the last 2 years competitively asked for quotes. We've gotten quotes from other companies like Shive and McKinstry. And what we've learned is that System Works is consistently lower, much lower than the other two. We've also learned that System Works does a very thorough job. Both of these jobs, one of them was like, 0.6% of the project, and the other one was 0.7% of the project. Very competitive. A lot of the design firms are getting, 6, 7, 8, 9%. So to test the systems, we feel that this is a competitive price. They're a very good firm. They don't design the system. All we're asking them to do is to test all the bells and whistles and make sure that the design works as intended. This goes back to Borlaug and how we had a few issues and we had to get resolved. And since that time, the state code has changed. It is required. There's 2 types of commissioning. One is where they actually get involved in the very front end with the design and give us their 2 cents worth. And we have done that. We did that at Liberty and a few other places. We did that at Hoover. On these 2 projects, they were pretty simple, straightforward. So all we asked them to do is to provide the analysis of the systems and if they work. And, check the bells and the whistles, make sure they coordinate with each other. So yes, we need qualified engineers. I believe we have that. And even more important is to make sure that what they design works, because you're going to find those problems early on. So we've really been problem-free since we started doing this. And System Works is our choice because they provided a good service at a good price. And routinely, we have checked them out. Can check them out again. I don't have a problem with that at all.
And when you said that you had approached other Chive and those, did they just never give you a bid?
No, they have on other projects. They didn't on this one.
Okay. Is that something we can encourage in the future, just to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
And if they decline or whatever, just please present that to us, that we know that either they chose not to participate or where they come in.
Not a problem.
All right, thank you. I move that we approve item B17.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
On to, I believe, agenda setting for Tuesday, July 12th. I believe we're-
Yeah, on the agenda for July 12th, I would like to have a discussion about how the Iowa City School District handled the Grant Wood request and that whole Grant Wood discussion. And I understand that we're going to have that at the meeting later on in July, but I think it would be good for us to get our ducks in a row in this room first before Grant Wood comes in, so we have our questions answered with our district personnel as far as timeline on how things happened, our approach to their request and that. So then when they come in, we've got our questions answered in-house, so it's not the type of a thing where we're in a three-way discussion where everybody's pointing a finger at everybody else. So I think it's wise that we do that before Grant Wood comes in, because, like I say, I would like us to be focused like a laser beam in that discussion with as our $6+ million advocate. So that's, I guess that's pretty general, but you understand where I'm headed with that, Steve? Yes. Yeah.
Is that the type of thing that we would do at the board table, or would that be more appropriate for
I think we do it at the board
work
table.
session?
Either one, I guess it depends on whether you want a conversation or a presentation. If you want the team to run through a presentation, we can definitely do it at the board meeting. If you want to have more back and forth or planning for the AEA meeting, we could do that at a work session afterwards. Get more people up at the table.
Couldn't we have both of that? Well, okay, so you say at the work session, so we could bring other people up. So you'd have that both at that meeting?
We do that right after
Have a presentation, then a work session to follow?
We could do that. Or you could just do it all at the work session, just walk right through it.
Well, I think there'd be some benefit for the community to see the district presentation.
What would you like in that presentation?
Timeline, Grant Wood AEA's requests, our responses, that type of a thing. Is walk us through where it started and where we are now.
So is it one or the other or both?
Both.
Both.
We have a presentation at the presentation at the meeting, and then we have a work session to follow.
Can we just do it at the meeting and just discuss it at the meeting?
We could, but I guess I was getting from administration they would rather have it broken up. But if they want to put it together, I think to me that makes sense.
I just think it's easier to
What
have
do
a
you
conversation around the table when you've got the team that's up at the table. It's totally up to the board.
I have no problem with the presentation and a discussion at the board table if that's satisfactory with administration.
Any objections to having it at the board table versus work session?
I don't know if I need to say this, but I guess my only thought would be that, and maybe this is implied, but if we can have the information ahead of time, so it's not so much us sitting and listening to a presentation, but we can be prepared to just discuss it. So we don't spend a lot of time hearing a presentation and then waiting to discuss later. That would be my thought.
Okay. And I think we have some other time planned for July 12th. Is that correct, Steve? We have early meeting planned for July 12th.
Closed session on the 12th.
Closed
I think
session
that
on
was
the 12th.
requested by the board earlier tonight.
Okay.
I would like to also continue the superintendent evaluation process. We had sort of talked about it in the last meeting, not necessarily to wrap it up, but we were going to be able to review the previous year's evaluations. We didn't get that chance as a group.
Yeah, I was under the impression that we were having a session tonight for that, so I was surprised we weren't. Can we just do that at the board table? So that, because it's been made clear to us that we need to have everybody present to view the prior year evaluation. So can we,
At the board table?
well, I don't care if we do it in closed session, but if it means that we have to put it off for another 2 weeks for closed session, I'd rather take 10 minutes and do it here and get it done when we're all here, because we've been told we have to do it when everybody's present.
Right.
We can't do it
I-
individually.
I think that would probably be in closed session then.
We have enough, if we're able to have that many closed sessions. I think tonight maybe was the issue that we couldn't have that many sessions. Was that why it got canceled for tonight?
No, I don't. I was under the impression that we were planning on convening on July 12th for that purpose.
Oh, okay, maybe we had.
Well, it has to be in
misunderstanding.
closed session if Steve wants to be. But we can have 2 closed sessions and
Right. Right.
going back to back, or we could do the evaluation afterward if we're worried about taking up too much time. I think back to back would be fine.
I don't know, we
No?
used 45 minutes tonight for,
Can we
Be possible to start it, and then if it doesn't finish,
Can we
continue
do
it?
can we do a closed session prior to the board meeting? Do the board meeting, and then I
Certainly.
guess where I'm hearing possible work session afterwards. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Phil, about the Grantwood AEA thing?
No, I think we decided we're going to do that all at
Okay.
the table.
So then we just go. We could reconvene in closed session afterwards for the other purpose.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Because 45 minutes puts us in a pinch before the 6 o'clock board meeting.
So we put the evaluation as the later one, so we would have potentially more time for that one.
I think that would be.
I think that makes sense. I
I think
mean,
that makes
because
a lot of
Joe doesn't
sense.
want to wait around until 10 o'clock to...
No, we can't afford it.
Right. So if we did the litigation closed session first, we have the
Yep.
board meeting, we have a short work session, and then we have the performance evaluation closed session. Is that the right order?
Although I'm getting not work session.
No, I got the works, oh, no, you're right, no work session.
So
So
closed session meeting.
Closed session litigation, meeting, closed session performance evaluation.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds like we're getting quite a bit to discuss already.
On the meeting agenda, again, I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion more about the boundary issue, but I wouldn't mind having just a limited item there for any follow-up questions about those junior high numbers that we'll get in the meantime. Because otherwise, we don't really have an opportunity to ask anything.
I just think they should be on the agenda so that they're made public.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, they won't be available to the public to see. They won't be on board docs. So,
So, since we're not really going to be doing anything with those numbers until a future work session when there's a 7th member, it's just wanting to get those numbers out there.
Right, and if for some reason we wanted to say, well, wait a minute, I thought I was getting this number instead of that number, we could do a quick follow-up, but I'm not thinking of a big discussion.
I guess I'm inclined to say if we're taking a break for 6 weeks, as was proposed at the last work session, that we take a break for 6 weeks.
Oh, I'm not really against the break. Again, it's just those particular things that I thought we were going to get in advance, just to have all the numbers out there. Just want to make sure that if there's a need to follow up on it, there's something on the agenda that we can use to follow up on it.
more a placeholder?
I guess I would,
Basically, yeah. I mean, we don't have to use the time at all if we feel like we got what we're looking for.
procedurally, I would be more in favor of the numbers being presented in work session versus at the board table. But yes, I do agree that the numbers need to be in board docs and available.
And I'm not thinking we're going to do any work on them. You know, like I sort of understand what
Well,
you're saying at a work session.
right,
If we were
so-
going to have a discussion of them, that's where it would happen.
So that's the thing, is that having a discussion at that table versus having a discussion at this table is, you know, somewhat different as far as potential for, I mean, I think that we need to digest the numbers before we have a discussion at this table. I'm just saying that procedurally it should be in a work session before here.
Well-
But yes, the numbers should be in board docs so they're available.
But I
Some
don't
point.
want to have a work session just for the point of putting this, what's probably just a placeholder.
We could have a 5-minute work session.
Nah. I'd just put it on the meeting agenda if it were me.
Latasha, any thoughts?
I think it's okay. I think what Chris is proposing is reasonable. And one other thing, I guess, it wouldn't take a lot of time, but at the Juneteenth listening post with the adults that I was talking to that weren't interested in beads, bubbles, or pencils, they'd really like to know the status of the superintendent's PhD program. And if we could just put a small update on that on the next agenda for, just, I don't think it's going to take more than 5 or 10 minutes, and if it takes more than that, then it's probably past due that we have a discussion on it. But there was every adult that came to me, I should say, 50% of the adults that came to me asked me that question.
I would say that's part of the evaluation process.
It is? I think that's just a question for the superintendent to say the status of his schooling. I could be, that's how I see it.
The requirement is not, I'm not sure what I can and can't say up here at the board table, so.
Is that something you can give us, Steve, or can't?
I'd be happy to. I'll put something in writing to you when we're done with the meeting.
Well, super. No, I'm just saying at the next meeting, if we could just have a small placeholder or something on that, just small discussion on it.
I'll give you a update after the meeting, and if you decide you want to put that on the meeting and that's not an evaluation content piece, then that would be your prerogative.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
All right, so that's what I'm seeing for agenda setting, and motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll reconvene in a work session at the back of the room.